got for girls that you know, or daughters of your own, and prevention or some sort of pain in some sort of joint on their body throughout their years. And even for my own, how are we going to manage this and also ensure doesn't prevent her doing sport, which is exactly what we were just talking about, trying to encourage them to be able to manage their growth and also keep them fit and well. And if they have any injuries, how do we get through that? So without further ado, I would love to introduce our speaker for this evening, a friend of Caroline. So we are very, very pleased to have him and that he's given up his time. I'm sure you have lots of questions that you'll want to ask him. So once again, we're going to leave the questions to the end as we did last week, but please pop them in the chat box. And at the end, Caroline's going to try and get through as many of them as we can. I'm sure Richmond will also mention to you about a podcast that he's got. We actually were on the podcast yesterday and it went live and it's absolutely brilliant. But equally, he's got some really fascinating people that he's interviewed. So I'd really encourage you to go and check out his podcast, which is called Positive Encouragers. And he's interviewing people that he feels are making some changes. So we were very thrilled that he invited us to talk about our campaign last night. So Richmond is a Harley Street physiotherapist and chronic pain specialist. In the past, he's worked with England rugby squad, but these days he focuses on helping people with their persistent pain, the #1 global health burden. Richmond is the father of 3 very sporty children, 2 of which are daughters. He himself likes the occasional ultra run to raise money for social enterprise, understanding pain. Yeah, absolutely fascinated but to hear about your running and how you cope with endurance. I'm sure you've got loads of tips for us. He's currently writing his new book, which we'd love to hear more about. And he has been interviewing people for his podcast, as we just mentioned. So without further ado, I would love to pass over to Richmond so we can hear more about the amazing work that you do.
Thanks. Hi everyone. Just one little correction there. I work with England Women, which makes it actually even more relevant to this. So, and I work with them in the sort of the early years when you basically got given a tracksuit top with England on it if you were lucky, and we stayed in army barracks in the middle of nowhere, through to when the lottery money came through and the facilities and the access and the level of input just went up and up and up. So that was a really, really exciting time. And thanks for mentioning the book. I can actually read a section, the only section of the book, and I'll read it to you all now as a preview. You ready? Yep. Introduction. Okay, moving on. That is literally all I've written so far. It is underlined. I told Caroline that the other day. So look, I'm going to try and make this as sort of interactive as we can in this, and it does sort of work. I've done it a few times. It does sort of work, and I've opened up the comment bar or chat bar. So open up your chat bars, and hopefully you've got a pen and paper, because I'm going to get you to write a few bits down. Oh, good. And also pop some stuff in the side. So let me share my screen because I've got some good old slides here. Okay. So we are talking injury prevention, and I believe we've got until about 11:30. Is that right? So I can hear you all laughing. Okay. Anyway, just brief declarations, because this is important to do this when you speak. So I do have a clinic, and I work with people with persistent pain. I lecture and talk about pain a lot to different people. I've got a social enterprise called Understand Pain, which is the ultra running is really my laboratory to explore pain and suffering. I quite enjoy it as well. I do some editing, and I'm a trustee for CRPS UK, which is a charity for a very painful condition, complex regional pain syndrome. Okay. Now, if there are social media rights, you can tweet and do bits along the way if you want. They're the handles. I'll just let you make a note of those if you want to. Some people like to tweet through things. That's fine. Okay, they're my three. And it's interesting because I was writing Sporty Kids, and we had this discussion last night about what sport means. Everyone have their own view, and probably leans a little bit towards games, or could be, you know, one person's sports, but sort of an element of competition perhaps with someone else, as opposed to sport maybe meaning just being active and just enjoying going out for a run or a walk, or to climb a tree or something else. So when I talk about sport, what I'm trying to take in the whole, really. So just bear that in mind, and also just for your own interest's sake, just see what your beliefs are around it. What we're going to do is go through some stuff. It is on injury prevention, but I'm going to kind of come through a different lens, which I think is a more positive way to go about it. So we'll sort of look at these areas. We're just going to touch on pain because that's a massive area, and we will be here till next Thursday if we start going into that in great detail. But I've got these pain points that I use with people that I see, and I've put them there so we can kind of go through them. I can explain briefly what they mean to really bring you up to date with what pain is, and that's so important because when particularly when someone first gets an injury, we can quite quickly go down the wrong route, not because we're doing anything, you know, harmful on purpose. Of course, we're trying to help, but we really need to understand what's happening. So that will help. So we'll give you a flavour of things, of course. So pen and paper, we've got that, which is great. Now, just to get you started, because it is 8 o'clock in the evening, so well done for turning up. That's always a good start. But just write down. You don't have to put this in the bar. This is on your bit of paper. Just write down 3 good things that have happened today. They don't have to be momentous, just 3 good things that have happened. And while you're doing it, what I'd like to do is just notice how you feel and what happens in your body when you do that. Okay. Now it's interesting because how quickly you're able to do that will give you a little insight into how sort of tuned you are in this sort of balance of what we deem to be positive things and maybe not so good things. But we can train ourselves to move more in that positive direction. You might wonder why I'm sort of starting with this. And the simple reason is because pain is a state. It's a biological state. It's a whole bunch of perceptions and sensations and feelings, but ultimately it's a state. And actually, if you check into your body right now, you're in a particular state. And when you do an exercise like this, you can see quite quickly through having an experience how quickly you can change state. And when someone's had pain for quite some time, and I spend most of my days with people who have had pain for a long time or can't get back to playing or for a whole bunch of different reasons, knowing that you can change state quite quickly by doing something like this, but also with moving and breathing and a bunch of other things, it starts to give hope, and it starts to help someone gain a sense of, oh, I can do this. There's an element of control, because most people have some amount of will, but they just don't have a way. And to move on, we need the will and the way. And so this is just a little exercise which can be quite useful. So as we go through things like this, there'll be little practical tips that you can use. So you can take these and run with them in your own way. These are the kinds of things I do with people every day. And then more in the line of your sporty activity, I just want you to think of someone who inspires you, or who has inspired you, perhaps to take up the sport, or perhaps they inspire you now as you're playing. It's someone that you're working with. And again, as you're thinking about that person and writing their name down, picture them, bring their image to your mind's eye, and just notice what happens in your body. Notice how your biology changes. What you focus on governs how you feel. And before we move on, just chuck into the comment bar some of the ways that that's made you feel. Just a couple of words or a word. Chuck them in the message box. Let's see what you're feeling. Happy from Abigail. Nice. Smile, eager. Valued. Yeah, it's a good one. Shoulders relax. Yeah. You're a little bit tense, perhaps. Motivated. Yeah. So all these great feelings, and we can use this. We can use this in a sense to change gears, change state, as I mentioned before, depending on where we are and what we're doing. So you've probably all got ways that you get into a particular zone or state before you go and play, before you go and do something. I'm assuming there's a sort of a mix of people, hopefully some teens, hopefully some parents, hopefully some coaches, hopefully some PE teachers and such like. But, you know, we all have to perform at different times in different ways. This is a kind of a performance for me. If you're a teacher, if you're a player, if you're a coach, you know, you're performing, you need to turn up, and you want to turn up in the best way you can, the best version of you, that sort of classic phrase, but it's true because you bring the energy, and that's vital. So good. Thanks for sharing those. All right. Now, these are what I call the basics, the absolute basics and fundamentals. So each sort of activity in sport will have its own considerations. So, let me just get rid of this thing. Okay. Will have its own considerations. So I've got the comments thing in the middle of my screen as well. So, but what do we need to take part in these things? So that's a basic, isn't it? Thinking, well, I might need certain clothing, I might need certain equipment, there's a particular environment, and hopefully some qualified coaches, but we also have a lot of helpers and volunteers and a lot of people behind the scenes, and they all play an important role as well. So that's just really, really basic stuff. But then so is this, the engagement. How engaged is the person, the team, when they turn up? Because if you're not engaged, and your mind's wandering around, then the risk of injury or something happening is greater. And similar with focus. Focus is so important, being able to pay attention to what you're doing. Boredom is when your mind is sort of uncontrollably wandering around. So if you're focused on something, you can't actually be bored, even if it's paint drying or just staring at a blade of grass. Actually, it's interesting because people are often horrified by the idea of just sitting in a room and not doing anything, just being silent and just sitting, and wonder what on earth you're doing, what kind of pleasure there could be from that. But really, I mean, I'm talking about meditation and contemplation there. That's a great way of learning how to focus your attention. We often need clear instructions, and particularly when we're learning something, so maybe it's a new skill, or maybe it's the first time we've turned up to something, we need to know what we're going to do. And of course, that relies on the person who's running the session telling you what to do clearly. And if you don't understand, then you need the confidence to speak up and say, sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about. Could you rephrase it? And that can be tricky. But these are all the reasons why, in a sense, that people can go off sport. They might go along and not have such a good experience because they're not really sure what they're doing and no one's really taken the time to help them. That could be really quite off-putting for someone, and would potentially increase the risk of injury. Getting feedback, that's important. You know, am I doing this in the right way? And there's a whole bunch of stuff on feedback. And actually, while we're on that, where is it? Here it is. Hold on. This. Take a picture of that. If you haven't and you want references and things, you do shout later.
Who's the author, Richmond? I'll just put it in the chat box.
Oh, has that not come up? There we go. Steve, it's Steve Rolnick, who we were talking about earlier, actually.
Yeah.
So motivational interviewing is a fantastic tool and way of communicating, particularly in the teaching and athletic arena, but really anywhere where we're trying to motivate people, help people be the best that they can. It's absolutely superb, and maybe some of you are already practicing it, which would be amazing. But if you're not, then check out Steve Rolnick's site as well, because he's been running a whole series of webinars during the lockdown, so going back into last year, and they're superb. He's a fantastic individual, and actually he's definitely a positive encourager, and he will be on the podcast soon as well. So feedback, a sense of safety. Now, talking about, well, it can be adults as well, but we're talking about kids and young people here. You need to feel safe to learn. The brain will only absorb information if the person feels safe. I can't emphasize that enough. And that really comes down to the environment, the approach of the teacher, the coach, the parent, and how they're doing it, right down to things like voice tone. Voice tone is so important in how we communicate certain things. Okay, did I make that point enough? And fun. We want our kids to have fun. We want them to go away wanting more. I want more of that. I love that. That's great. Get that real passion going. They're the basics. And then we got sort of slightly more specific basics, but these are still basics. So strength and conditioning, and I'm not going to go into detail about this because there's plenty of stuff elsewhere. Flexibility, sports specific stuff, and what you eat and drink. Not only when it's sort of training time, but all the time. Eating well is not a part-time thing. So when I think about performance, that's just the real tip of the iceberg. Whereas everything else that leads to that sits underneath, and that's the bulk of it. So the iceberg analogy works well. There's a whole load of things that we need in place to perform. So let's explore some of the things that potentially disrupt what's going on, the swirling currents underneath inside us. And I think it's useful to think about these things because they're so common, and particularly at the moment, there's all sorts of challenges. And people say, oh, well, you can go out and exercise, and it always seems quite straightforward. And I was chatting to Professor Greg White today on the podcast, and we were talking about this and COVID, and there have been lots of fantastic initiatives to encourage people to be active, but there are still huge problems. And one of the links that hasn't been made is how we live and the choices that we make as individuals to do with diet and sleep and other things that are very, very important are all hugely impacting upon how our immune system works. You take stress, for example. If we're experiencing chronic stress, so that means we're regularly feeling stressed. What our body does is it switches at a gene level into being more inflammatory. So we kind of end up with this, what I call life-itis. Itis refers to being inflamed. And if we're inflamed, it means things like we don't sleep very well, we don't concentrate so well, our memory is not very good, our mood is up and down, we get aches and pains, our gut plays up, and on it goes. Now, there are some fairly straightforward ways of dealing with it, but you have to understand the nature of the problem first. What is it about the situation that's causing stress? Why is it that in that individual within their life they're getting stressed about A, B, and C? So I can't make specific comments because it is so very, very individual. But what kinds of things? And again, chuck some words into the comment bar if you will. What kinds of things cause you persistent stress, and not just the odd thing, because actually a little bit of stress is good, that gives you a boost, but it's just that more consistent thing. What sorts of things bother you? Tests, bad traffic. What else? Don't be in the car with Miss Jackson if there's bad traffic. Homeschooling, yeah. School, oh, shame. Workload. Lockdown, deadlines. Yeah, okay. Nothing really unexpected there, of course. Now try this. If you write down on your piece of paper, and you can do this later because otherwise we won't get through the material and have time for questions. But very simple way of looking at this. Okay, the first thing you write down is the things I can control are, and then in another part of the page, the things I can't control are.
This guy is amazing. He's so good.
Oh, thanks. I don't know if you meant to say that, but anyway, good on you. and the other thing is you can write down is someone's volume. Oh, they've gone.
Just while I struggle to put everybody on mute again, can you just make sure that you're on mute, please, everybody? Although Richmond has had some immediate feedback, which he's loving.
Immediate feedback. Yeah.
If we could just ask that everybody stays on mute. Thank you.
And the third thing to write down is the things I can influence are. So I'll give you some hints. One thing we can never control is other people. But the one thing we can learn to control better and better and better is our approach. And we can sculpt our own approach to life. We might need some help. Well, we always need some help actually on that front, but we can sculpt an approach to life that works for us, which means that those things that now cause us stress gradually become less and less stressful because you're focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't. My little sister's ego. Brilliant. Okay, now tiredness. Tiredness. So many people complain of feeling tired. So again, it seems like the easy thing. Well, you need more sleep, but of course it's not quite as straightforward as that because people struggle with sleep, so they need to learn how to create a sleep habit. And so again, you might need a little bit of assistance with that. Pressure. Where does pressure come from? Again, just chuck down in the, because I'm interested to see what people think about pressure. Where does the pressure come from? Where do you feel pressure? Chuck it in the comment box. Peers, coach, yeah, myself, yeah. Social media popping up there a few times. I assume you've seen I can't remember the name of that. What's that Netflix thing that's on? What's it called? The
Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma, yeah. It's we're kind of letting ourselves be owned by people that make a lot of money in California. So anyway, we can make our choices. We can make our choices there. So again, all of those, there'd be the classic things that people will talk to me about. And of course, that pressure can lead to stress, which has its own biological impact. And all of these things will basically increase the risk of injury. So they need to be looked at individually, and they need to be managed better and better and better, which of course is what you can do. Now, you can look at it that way, but it all feels rather negative to me. And it's like, oh, heavy. So, okay, what can we do? How else could we look at this? We can look at it like this, okay? And this is what I prefer to do, is to focus on building wellness. So if I said to you, right, we've got two choices here. We can manage your stress, we can manage your pressure, or we can focus on building your wellness and shape a positive future. Which sounds better? So I'm going to imagine that you're going for the second one, because otherwise the rest of the talk's kind of out the window. So we'll go with that. That's one of the advantages of doing it like this. There's no. Now there are lots of ways. There are lots of ways of building wellness, but these three are very important. We need sleep. We need sleep. Now, I'm not going to go into detail again because of time, but if you want some stuff on this, I would suggest that you listen to any podcast with Matthew Walker. So he's a scientist. He's a very good scientist. He's English, but he's based out in California. And he wrote a book recently on sleep, which is widely available. But his podcasts, you know, if you listen, or just go to his website and you'll see there's a bunch of podcasts that you can listen to, and there's more than enough information for you to get going on the realities of sleep. I'm going to give you one of the most popular points about sleep, and that is that just one alcoholic drink disrupts your night's sleep. That one never goes down well. But it's true. So the thing is, though, we take this information and we choose what we do with it. So I'm not telling you what to do. You take the information, you decide what matters to you, what's important, and then forward you go. Now, breathing, we're going to talk about breathing, and I'm going to teach you a couple of breathing things because I think that's very practical and useful. And of course, movement. And movement comes in many forms. So at the end of the day, the brain, the body needs movement. I use the phrase "motion is lotion." It's quite a good one to remember. And you know, we spend a lot of time sitting. You know, even if you go out and play games or have PE or go for a run once a day, you probably find you're still spending a lot of time sitting, and that also has quite a big impact on the way that we breathe as well. So we need to move often during the day. I'm at my standing desk now, and that's been a revelation. Not necessarily for everyone, but yeah, I found it to be excellent. I'd much rather be on my feet when I'm doing. I do quite a lot of online calls now, and yeah, it's much better. So everyone has to find their own way, again, with the information. Notice it's choosing to shape a positive future. It's your choice there. Okay. Now this is important. It's all important, but I like to always start with that because it gets your attention. We need connections, and these four things I think are key. And it occurred to me one day, and there's a very good book by Johann Hari called Lost Connections, and it's really about depression and anxiety, largely about depression. It's a very good book. Again, he's very good to listen to. He's on lots of podcasts, and he talked a lot about in depression. Yes, there is a biology. Yes, antidepressants can have a role, but actually it's more than that. It's about the person. And that really resonated with me as well, because when it comes to pain, it's the person that feels pain, not the body part. And he's got some wonderful examples of this. But it kind of boils down to these four things. So 3 P's and a B. And sometimes I get people to guess, but we can't really do that here. So I'm going to tell you what they are for you. You can see them on the screen. But people. Now, in a way, there are 2 types of people. We can think of them as pot fillers and pot drillers. So a pot filler is someone who, when you spend time with them, you're energized. They inspire you. Think about that person you wrote down their name at the beginning. You feel great. They make you feel like you're the center of their world. It's awesome. And then you got pot drillers. And pot drillers are people who, unfortunately, will drain your energy. It's kind of hard work. So of course, what we need to try and do is spend as much time as we can with the pot fillers. Not always easy, but as a general principle, but it also gives us a bit of a guide, because I can think of myself, right, how full is my pot right now? Yeah, okay, it's all right. If it's not, then I'm thinking, well, how can I lift my energy here? What sorts of things can I do to lift my energy? Okay, so that's people. A purpose. What's my purpose? Sounds like a bit of a grand question, but it could just be to go to school. It could just be, I'm going to play this game or do this piece of work. It could be that I want to encourage girls to become more active so that they shape a positive future. You know, come up with your own purpose. But we know that if we have a purpose, and this is actually an exercise that people often need to do to really establish what it is and come up with a sentence or a few words, it can be really useful in those moments where you're feeling a bit, ugh. You think, no, this is my purpose. That's what gets me going. And actually, when I'm doing the ultra running, when at times when it's quite tough, you might reflect on that, or the reason why you're doing it, or the people that you're trying to inspire or help, and very quickly your state changes, and you keep going. Life's an endurance game after all. The planet, and by the planet, what I really mean is nature, getting out into nature. And there was a study last year showing that there's definite health benefits of a couple of hours a week in nature. So wherever that might be, the garden, trees, park, beach, get out there and feel it. And this time of year, it can be dark, it can be wet, it can be cold, but that's nature. And we're very closeted, and we live very, on the whole, comfortable lives compared to how we used to. It's easy to go and get food out of the fridge. We can turn the heating up rather than put a jumper on. I'm always unpopular at home because I'd say, no, don't turn the heating up, put a jumper on or move around. It always goes down well. Not. But the more we can adapt, this is why cold showers is good. This is why fasting is good, because you become much more adaptable. You learn to control your physiology much better. And the more flexible you are, the better you'll deal with it. If, in a sense, if you can't deal with a cold shower, how are you going to deal with something that's really stressful in life? So learning to deal with these kind of minor discomforts, which you're in complete control of, is a great way of building one's resilience. Okay. So, and the final one is your body. You must be connected with your body because you're whole. This whole idea of mind, body, mental health, physical health, that's not the reality. Just check into your own experience. Where's your mind? You are your mind, you are your body. It's one. And that's not alternative speak. This is, based on neuroscience or current neuroscience and philosophy. We can't think of people as different bits or body systems or whatever, because we just don't work like that. Every moment is made up of how we're acting, what we're perceiving, and what we're thinking. And actually, it's well thought that the world that we perceive and that sense of self is really governed by the way that we're thinking and moving. So you're literally creating the sense of the world through the movement that you're making. You're gathering sensory information, which your brain is predicting the meaning of and bringing it alive. And so we see the world we expect to see. The brain is a predictor, not a responder. And there's a brilliant TED talk which talks quite a lot about this. Actually, several. One is by Anil Seth, S-E-T-H. That's definitely worth a watch. And Lisa Feldman Barrett, she also runs with this same model of the brain, and her talk's more emotions based, but again, a TED talk, but again, excellent. And there's also another one by Mick Thacker who's using predictive processing, which is this model of prediction on pain. So those three, and I usually get the people that I see to watch those in tandem with the conversations we have, the practical conversations we have, to help them while we're helping them understand their pain. So connecting with the body, and really that means paying attention. So things like yoga, Pilates, or movement, stretching, but really any movement. It could be when we're walking. You're just paying attention to how your body feels. You're curious about what's happening. So the approach is really this. Let me just check on time. Okay. This sort of is in a nutshell where, you begin by clarifying your picture of success. You can use this for anything that you're doing, but I would use this with someone who's struggling and doesn't have the way. So we create the way. What's your picture of success here? And it might be that they just want some more control. It might be that they need some tools just to deal with something that's very difficult at the moment. But they will come up with this, the real results that they want. Of course, if it's sporting, it might be, I want to return to playing this or doing that. We then clarify their strengths. So this delves into the positive history. So when have you faced a challenge before? What did you do? How did you deal with it? How did you overcome it? And how can you use those principles now and build on? And through that, we can identify strengths like perseverance or courage or focus or whatever. And they're all really useful because actually it helps them to deal with that challenge, but life's full of challenges. So it's not just for that. So it's a real learning process. And then you're designing a practical way onwards, right? These are the things to do each day. So you've got your daily habits that you bring in, and you interweave those into other important things that you're doing. And then these are ways that you can deal with the more difficult moments. So you've got your daily plan. And just going into that a little bit more, I think a morning routine is good. You've probably all seen that motivational talk with the naval officer who starts with saying that you should make your bed. I mean, there's something in that. There's definitely something in that, whereby when you're trying to form a habit, if you do that thing first thing in the morning, then you're more likely to think of doing it again later on. And you're even more likely to if you actually create a plan. So you prioritize and you periodize your day just like an athlete. So say it's a school day. I know it's online at the moment, but you know when you've got certain lessons, you know that you've got lunch, and then you know you've got break and this, that, and the other. And then you can interweave into those, right, this is some time for some breathing, this is some time for some moving, this is some time for putting my feet up, this is some time for putting on music and jumping around the room playing air guitar or whatever it might be. So you're bringing in all these positive steps through the day. And then at the end of it, you can write down what's gone well and build up your own kind of log of successes. But you create your own pillars because everyone has their own unique things that work for them. And those pillars are really, this is the stuff I must do every day to move forward. And at the end of the day, you know, the habits that you have, and everyone has habits and we need them because they're shortcuts. Otherwise we wouldn't really achieve much. But they really determine the quality of your life. So it's worthwhile thinking about which habits work for you and deliver results and which ones don't. And I wanted to give you a couple of tips on creating new habits. We're not used to doing this, but the important thing is to set the bar low. So when I say to people, well, how many times will you definitely do that? The key word is definite. Because if I said, well, how many times are you going to do it? Some people say, oh, I'll do that 3 or 4 times a day. I say, all right, okay. Definitely? Well, yeah, most days. Okay, well, what will you definitely do? And usually it comes down to 1. But that's great. Because if you do that 1, and then you acknowledge and celebrate, and go, yeah, I did it, and you log it, well, then you start to get that inner drive, that inner motivation going. And that's awesome, because then you think about it later and you do it again, and you go, oh, I'm superhuman today. I've done it twice. And it builds on from there. So it might start with 1 rep. It might start with 1 breath. It might start with 1 step. And on you go from there. So just bear that in mind. The other thing that can be important here is to have a plan for your challenges, because there's going to be. It's not a case of, is there going to be some tough bits? It's just when. So having a way of managing yourself, learning about what you can control, using things like breathing as a way of putting the brakes on when you're feeling a little bit tense or a little bit worried. And then once you've created that space, you can actually draw on that positive history and create and tap into those liberating beliefs. What have I done before here that's worked? Doesn't mean it's a comfortable ride, but you've got a way. And if you're present and you've got the encouragement around you and you've got some pot fillers you can go to, and I understand that some people, not everyone will have that, and they'll need to go out and find them, and they can. You can find people out there. If you go and ask for help, there will be people who will help you. And in this way, it's sort of a stoic idea in the sense that the obstacles then become a step on, and we learn. So obstacles become opportunities and problems become possibilities. And it's great once you start coming through that lens, because then you can just run with it and take it into the rest of your life. And sport's fantastic for that as well. So just jot down now in the comment bar. You can also put it on your bit of paper. What lifts your energy? What kinds of things bring you joy in the moment? What can you do? Fire it into the box. People, yeah. meeting people. Dance party, yeah. Yeah. Laughing, yeah, awesome. Feeling you've achieved something. Getting a thank you, yeah. So, you know, if you make your list of things that lift your energy, when you're feeling tired, you can say to yourself, right, what can I do to lift my energy? Because if you ask yourself that question, then you'll answer it. If you're tired and you say to yourself, oh, why am I so tired? You'll also answer that. And you'll come up with a list of reasons why you're tired. Oh, I didn't sleep well, all this going on, that going on. And you'll feel worse. The key skill is the questions that you ask yourself. So make your list of things that bring you joy and pleasure and lift your energy, and make sure you interweave those into your day. And if you can't actually get there, then you can just imagine it. So that thing that you've just written down in the box, if you close your eyes for a moment and think about it and imagine it and see yourself there doing it, and just notice what happens in your body. Okay. What did you feel? Chuck it in the box. What did you notice? Just thinking about that thing that lifts your energy. What happens to your energy? Yeah. So you don't even have to be there. So you can make these things happen yourself. This is all the stuff you can control. Thinking of a hug. Yeah, you can hug yourself actually. It's nice. Touch is important. And we are touch starved at the moment from people we love. That's tough. Okay. Oh, someone started toe tapping. Excellent. Excellent. All right, brilliant. Good stuff. Cursor win. Now, I just wanted to make the point that after a game, and it could be an individual thing, of course, as well, or after you've done something, what's your tendency? What do you focus on? Do you focus on the things that went wrong, or do you focus on the things that went well? And you'll know the answer to that. My encouragement to you is to focus on what went well first, and then you can think about managing the other areas. But particularly if you're leading a team meeting, people may have other opinions, that's fine. But when we focus on what went well, and this could be a staff meeting, a team meeting, a meeting between, business associates or whatever, wherever there's a meeting of people, if you start with, well, what are we doing well here? It engages people because they feel safe, they feel valued. If you start off with, oh, this has gone wrong, this is a disaster, you were rubbish, it has a complete opposite effect. You've got disengagement, you've got fear, you've got stress, you've got anxiety. Completely pointless, waste of time. Nothing valuable is going to happen there. So coaches and captains and all the rest, you've got a real responsibility there, which I know that you relish. That's why you do it. So what went well? Good question for all of us to ourselves. Now I'm assuming that everyone breathes. So there's some important things about breathing, of course, and why you'd want to practice, because it's interesting. A lot of people don't breathe very well at all, so they're not oxygenating their body as well as they could. So there's a lot of over breathing. There's a lot of breathing up in the chest. There's a lot of mouth breathing, and that affects everything, because the oxygenation of your body affects basically every other system. So it's pretty important, which is why it was there as one of the key skills of being well. So I thought, and there's lots of stuff on this. There's lots of things that you can look at if you're interested. I always have a handy selection of things here I can show you. So this is very good. Okay. But I'm going to summarize it, and I'm going to just mention a few practices. Now, some of you probably already doing this, and that's great. The first very simple thing you can do is nose breathe all the time. So discover what you do. Go away when this is finished, and discover what happens when how you breathe. Is it noisy? Are you bunged up? Do you snore? Well, you'll have to ask someone else if you snore. Do you wake up in the morning with a really dry mouth? When you run upstairs, are you out of breath? Is breathing hard work? You know, those kinds of things. So discover how you're breathing, but do your best to breathe through your nose. If you get congested, you can do this. You take a small breath in through your nose and a small breath out through your nose, and then you hold it and you just move your head up and down. And you keep moving your head up and down, holding your nose, until you feel that desire to breathe again. And then you breathe through your nose. And you might do that a few times. And if there's congestion, if that's the reason for the difficulty or the airways not being so patent, then that will help you. So that's a very simple thing that you can do. But it's important to breathe through the nose because, well, the nose is for breathing, but it's a filter, so it filters all the pollution and bugs and things in the air, and it warms and moistens the air that you then deliver to your airways. You also release nitric oxide, which opens the airways and the blood vessels. So it really facilitates the whole thing. If you breathe in through your mouth, you're breathing in all that polluted, grimy, cold, harsh air straight to your airways. So it's really like, you know, when you go abroad and you turn on the tap and the water you want to drink, you're really thirsty, and you turn on the tap and this sort of brown water comes out. And well, that's kind of like breathing through your mouth. Whereas you have that nice bottled water that's clear and that's like breathing through your nose. So it's worthwhile just having a little think about that and how you breathe and how you oxygenate. Now, with the over breathing, which again is quite common, or breathing up in the chest, the issue with that is that if you breathe into the chest, there's much more of the sympathetic nerve supply up here, which means that, sort of cut a long story short, you can feel anxious by breathing here. But of course, what we do as humans is we think, well, why am I anxious? And we'll pull out that long list of things that we worry about and think, oh yeah, it was that. But actually it wasn't. It was just because of the way that I'm breathing and a habit of breathing. The bases of the lungs have more parasympathetic supply. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that organizes all the restorative processes like building energy, healing, anti-inflammatory, digestion, and all those things that we really, really need lots and lots and lots of in our hectic world. So breathing deep is not going, that's a big breath. That doesn't oxygenate the body well at all. Breathing deep means going into the lungs. So breathing with the diaphragm. So as you're breathing in, you should notice that your tummy goes in and out. So you can put your hand on your tummy, breathe in through your nose, and just encourage that movement down into the lower part of the lungs. And it's quite interesting because a lot of people find that difficult to start with because they're so used to using the chest, but there should be very little movement in the chest. It should mainly be lower down. And this is even when you're exercising. So when you go out running and doing other things, try and breathe through your nose as best you can. And those patterns that I've mentioned there, they're just different ways, or they're timings, if you like. So you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4, and you gradually can build that up to breathing in for 4, breathing out for 8. Because when we breathe out, again, that parasympathetic nervous system becomes more active, and you can feel that sense of calm if you're tuned into your body. So that's a really nice thing that you can do in the morning to oxygenate your body, but also at night to relax and calm. And you'll feel your body getting warm as the blood vessels open up and your blood pressure drops a little bit and you relax. But also you can start to feel sharper because you're getting more oxygen into your body. So they're quite straightforward practices. I know that's a very whistle-stop tour, But you can always contact me if you want more information. But there's lots of stuff out there on it. But we could spend ages on breathing. Okay, so you're all probably getting a bit tired now. So let's get into the last bit. Do you get that? Do you get the slide? No, but do you really get it? Do you understand the joke? You have to speak French. Yay, well done, John. It's not very funny, I know, but anyway. Right, moving on. So look, these are the pain points, and so pain is just part of the way we protect ourselves. There's lots of other stuff going on, but it's part of the way we protect ourselves. So it's important to remember that. It motivates action. In most cases, we're compelled to do something, whether it be rub it or call out or ask for help. You can think of pain as a need state, like hunger or thirst. It's there as a message. And what we need to discover is, what is this message? Now, it might be something obvious like protect the area because I've just sprained my ankle. But if it's a more persisting pain, then there are a lot of other influences. There's other stuff that hasn't been processed within that person in their life, which means that they're remaining more in this kind of protect state than anything else. So it needs a much more in-depth conversation and discussion about how they are, their lifestyle, what's been going on, what's happened before, etc., etc. A really key point to understand is that pain and injury is really poorly related, or pain and tissue damage is poorly related. And this is where it commonly goes wrong. People think that the amount of pain equates to the amount of damage, and it doesn't. We've known that for years and years. The famous study or paper on this was in 1973. So there's nothing new about this understanding. But yet in the modern healthcare system, it persists in looking for some kind of pathology or injury to explain a pain that's been there for some time. And you can't see pain on a scan or an x-ray or anything anyway, because it's the person that feels it. It's a subjective perception. So, you can have a paper cut be very painful. You can have someone with a severe trauma that has no pain at all in that moment. It's enormously varied. Pain's always embodied. When we start talking to people about the complexities of it and the fact that your mood and your focus and attention play a role in it, they start saying, what are you saying? It's in my head. No, it's not in your head. It's wherever you feel it, it's wherever you perceive it's in your body. And that's even if you don't have a body part. So you might have heard of phantom limb pain. So you don't actually need the body part to have pain in that space, because that space is represented within the nervous system. So we can still feel it, and that pain is just as real as any other. And in fact, it's obviously pretty harrowing for someone who does have phantom limb pain. So they really need to understand what's going on. I mentioned before that the pain is perceived by the person, not the body part. So it's not my knee that goes off to get help. It's me that needs help. And two of the main players in pain are where your attention is and what your expectations are. And most people are quite surprised by that, particularly if they're thinking that pain is somehow related to how the body is. But pain is much better related to how the person is and their life, rather than the tissue state, which is why you have to get to know the person and their circumstances. And pain varies. Pain can moment to moment. 1 minute it can be the person can be fine, next minute it can be very, very painful. And that can be confusing for other people who can't see anything, of course. You can't see pain, but it does bring problems because people feel that they're not believed, because, well, you were fine and you were walking okay a minute ago, why, but that's because the person doesn't understand pain, which is why it's such an important mission. But most importantly, pain can change and it can get better. And I'm talking about persisting pain there, or chronic pain. The person does get better and can get better. They just need to know how. And this is just a very, very quick look at the approach, and that is that it's always person first, and it's giving them the tools and the practices and the strategies, the support, the encouragement and the guidance. It's proactive. Only the person can get better. So you, again, like that model I described before, you're focusing on the person's picture of success and then giving them steps that they can take each day. So some are proactive and some are more, well, how do I respond in that situation? Okay. All right, so just quickly jot down 3 things you've learned. I'm not going to test you. but just jot down 3 things you've learned. And I saw this was nice, a nice quote from Prof. Feynman Twitter feed. Feynman was a famous physicist, but he's a very intelligent and sensible guy, philosopher. You are under no obligation to remain the same person you were a year ago, a month ago, or even a day ago. You are here to create yourself continuously. I thought that was a good message for youngsters. Okay, so they're my contact details, and bits if you want anything. I'm always tweeting and putting stuff out there, and the podcast, so you can have a look at that. And yeah, open for some questions. Now, just as a caveat, I can't give specific medical advice or treatment advice. It has to be general, of course, because I don't know you. So
okay, so we've had a couple of questions come through, Richmond. This one was an anonymous question about a daughter. I don't know how old she is, and you might say that you don't want to answer this one, but it might apply to other people, who has colitis of the bowel, and the links that has to injuries. She's been told that by having that condition, it could lead to injuries in other parts of her body. Is that a true statement of fact, based on the fact, I mean, I appreciate you don't know any of the people involved, neither do I. Have you heard of that kind of connection before?
yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's a very strong message for the girl, and there's a fine balance of handing over information. There's a big debate around diagnoses as well, which rightly so, because you think, well, how useful is it for someone to know that and to think that? Because actually, to be active and to be out there doing things is very important, particularly for managing a condition. So colitis is an inflammatory condition, if people didn't know that. And I've already mentioned that if there is inflammation in the body, you know, we should be looking to do things that are anti-inflammatory. So, for example, breathing techniques and movement and other things, and also managing things that make us more inflamed. So yeah, I mean, I can't give specific advice on that. Yes, there are going to be some health considerations, and I think that you know, it will be useful for her to clarify in more detail what she can and can't do. But there will be some things that she can do to be active, because you need to be active.
Yeah, okay. We've had another question about cold showers, and what's your theory on those with regard to pain, injury prevention, and wellness in general?
Yeah, again, it's you can use it for all of the above, really. I mean, there's mixed evidence on cold for injury. So, and these things are always being updated. So, but a daily cold shower, as I mentioned before, is a great way of building some resilience. It gives your immune system a bit of a shot. It buzzes you in the morning. You know, you can feel really quite alive. And you can start by just being in the shower and just turning it down a little bit. So it's kind of warmish, getting towards cold, and you do that for 30 seconds or so, and then you make it colder each day. And then you gradually build up the time. So you can just gradually do that. And I think that there are positive effects. You know, Wim Hof is well known in this field for all the cold stuff. And there's been some remarkable findings with some good studies, you know, looking at how the immune system responds. So yeah, give it a go.
I think that's really a good point, though, because Wim Hof has become such a thing now that people feel that you have to go to that extreme straight away. Whereas what you've just said about turning the heat down a little bit and just slowly, you know, turning it down more and more whenever, it means that people can sort of get there little by little. I know of lots of people that are just, excuse the pun, but plunging right into the Wim Hof thing. And I'm kind of like, wow, it's amazing. I couldn't do it. So I think that's a really nice halfway point. Right, we've got some other questions. What age group do you think has the most and worst injuries when it comes to teens or children in general?
I don't think you can put an age group on it, really.
No.
I think that it depends. You know, you've got, you know, youngsters running around when they're, you know, 4, 5, 6, can bump into each other and fall over and get scrapes. You know, say, take rugby, for example, when they start playing contact, and cricket when it starts to be the hard ball. You know, there's these natural transitions in the game where you might start seeing, you know, different things happening. It would depend on the, you know, look at gymnastics and how much training is going on. So you'd have to look at each individual sport and activity, really, to look at those patterns.
Here's a question from some people that I know that Joe knows. What's your opinion on using K-tape for a long-term injury? So this is the lady I'm assuming that Joe was maybe referring to last night, who's got a bad injury. I don't know a lot about K-tape, I have to be honest.
She's very excited she was on the podcast last night.
Yeah, I don't use tape. I used to do a lot of strapping when I worked in rugby and whatnot, and people become very dependent upon it. It becomes part of the safety mechanism, you know, actually you get pretty heated debates in social media about it. You've got a big fan club, and usually they're the ones selling it, and then you've got other people coming from the more sort of pain science viewpoint saying, well, no, there's not really anything that suggests it's got a role in persistent pain. You know, it's and I would probably err more towards that. But if someone came in and they were using it, I wouldn't sort of say, oh, take that off. You know, that's a bit like someone coming in who smokes, and you say, well, stop smoking. You know, it's a resource. It's something they're using to deal with a problem, and you can't just take it away without replacing it with other options and understanding. So in the long term, no, it doesn't have a role, but in the short term, it's providing something. We need to discover what that is and then find some better ways of moving on.
Yeah. I mean, am I right in thinking, Rich, that the way that you approach pain is such that it's much more cerebral rather than physical, if you see what I mean?
No, it's whole. There's no separation. I don't see it as a mind and a body. I mean, mental health, I have a real issue with even the term mental health, because it sort of implies there's nothing tangible there, because it's not physical, and that's just not how it works. And I say, when you examine your own experience, you examine your own mind, you quickly realize that actually, you know, this sense of self, you can't find it anyway. So, you know, we need to help people to understand that. But of course, we're brought up in this dualist model, this Cartesian model. And it's the way that healthcare predominantly works still. You know, you go into a particular department for this organ, and then you go over there for that organ. You go into another hospital for the mind thing. And you know, you can understand why, but it just needs to be brought more and more together. To get in touch with the truth.
We've actually got a question from one of our speakers for next week. So Kate, if you can reveal yourself and give everybody a wave. So Kate is one of our nutritionists, and she's speaking next Tuesday on teen nutrition. And she was just going to say, well, you're in the dark, Kate, we can't see you. She was just going to say, how do you involve nutrition in a pain/injury management plan?
I wasn't expecting to be visible, so excuse the scruffy.
Sorry to call you out, Kate.
Yeah, give me warning. Hi. That was amazing. That was so interesting.
Thanks. How do you involve nutrition in pain injury management? pain/injury management, Rich?
Well, no, I mean, it's not my area. So if people want detail, then I'll encourage them to go and talk to someone who knows a lot more about it. I mean, I went plant-based a year and a half ago to see what it was like, mainly to see how it affected the ultra stuff. And people ask about it. They and I just say, look, this is my experience, but you need to take the right kind of advice. But eating the right stuff is so important for performance, for wellness. So yeah, it's a basic, really.
Okay, thank you for that. And sorry, Kate, what item on the market would you recommend to all athletes to help prevent injuries? I mean, I think that's a huge question.
Well, I don't think there is one.
No.
I don't, you're talking about individuals with, when someone experiences an injury, say it's an ankle sprain, take a common one. And actually, I often use this as an example of the different trajectories that people can go on. This could be the same person. You remember the film Sliding Doors? This could be the same person. And they're walking down the street and it's pouring with rain and they've just been dumped. Sorry if you have just been dumped. They hate their job, and then they put their foot down a pothole and sprain it. Now, the response, the biological response to that and the behavioral response to that is going to be very different to someone who's walking down the street. It's a sunny day, they're feeling great, they're listening to some music, everything's wonderful. I mean, it sounds like a silly example, but it's not. And it actually goes back before then, because nothing happens in isolation, and particularly with persistent pain, it's often there is unprocessed early life trauma. Everyone experiences traumas with capital T's and small t's. And what that means is that biologically, the systems that protect us get triggered by that, and then get triggered and triggered and triggered on through life, which can mean that sometimes the way someone responds to an injury is well out of proportion to what's actually happened. And when I say response, I'm talking sort of biologically mainly, and can have a really big pain response. If it's a traumatic episode, like a car accident, that kind of thing, there's massive load of protection that kicks off. So the pain can often be well out of proportion to what's going on. So you have to really get to know the person and their life experiences to help them to understand what's happening now. But that allows them then to focus on what to do to get better. So you don't have to dwell massively on what's happened, but you need to understand it to make the link as to, well, why is this happening to me now? Okay,
thank you. How important is a good S&C program alongside sports training, and does it reduce injury? I don't know what S&C is.
Strength and conditioning.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're performing, at a good level, then it's very likely that you're going to be doing some strength and conditioning work behind the scenes. And as I mentioned with the iceberg thing, that's one of the components, and it's definitely one of the basics. I think that the amateur sports people, or the weekend warriors, it's classic. You sit all week and then go out charging around. So strength and conditioning doesn't necessarily mean going down the gym and pumping iron. It can be a whole range of things, from just doing stuff each day. It can be, a stretching or movement or nourishing routine, a movement routine, some breathing. All of those things would be included within that. So you're basically preparing your body for what it is you're going to do. So if you don't do that, then you're definitely at a disadvantage. And I would say that the risk of injury is greater if you don't do something outside of the whatever it is you're doing.
Do you think there's one gender that's more prone to injury than another?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, certainly when it comes to chronic pain, the numbers are greater in females than males. I don't have any figures to hand on just pure injury, but I think it's important to look at the differences. And there's a lot of work that's been done on this. But the problem we've got is that a lot of work that's done, the basic science work, is done on rats. Now, there's always a problem there in that what can you take from a rat to a human, first of all. But they're also done mainly in male rats. So, when you're looking at some of the basic, neuroscience and understanding of how things work, that has to be considered. And that's been raised a lot over the years, that more research needs to be done using female animals and female models to really understand. But I know that you had a session last time on the menstrual cycle, and that definitely has an impact. There's a laxness in tissues and ligaments at certain points in the cycle. So understanding that's important for the type of training, because you might ease off a little bit during that, or you might avoid certain things during those few days. So there are some important considerations.
And that's exactly what Emma Ross said last week as well, about the fact that a lot of the testing has been done on men, even, believe it or not, around the menstrual cycle, which is absolutely bonkers. Are women more sensitive to the inflammation and depression relationship than men?
I mean, again, I can't give you any stats. My clinical experience would say, I mean, I see more women than men with pain problems, but that doesn't necessarily mean that extrapolates out into society. As you can probably imagine, mood is always part of what's going on, quite naturally. So, I mean, to be honest, I just deal with and work with the person in front of me. Obviously there are certain considerations in terms of role and past experience and stage of life, whether it be menopausal or teen, or and what kinds of things they're experiencing in life, so biologically, but also just are they at school, at college, university, working, married, so you have to put all of that into the
look at the whole package.
Always.
What area of the body do you think is more injury prone? Is there one area that you see all the time?
Well, back pain's obviously very common.
He says sitting up. Yep.
But no, I think often people come in and they start by talking about their back pain, but then by the time we finished, or they finished telling me their story, there's other bits as well. Irritable bowel or pelvic pain, headaches, migraines, jaw problems, so that's quite common. But there's other things as well, and what I help them to do is to join the dots and understand the bigger picture.
We've got some nice feedback here, Richmond, saying thank you so much for another fascinating evening. Good question here, which I think you might have alluded to, but are you saying, I think this person is sort of asking for clarification, are you saying that experiences that are unrelated to the injury that you have at this moment in time, so previous trauma, can impact the injury that you have at the moment?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily impact the injury, because the injury could be putting my foot down a hole, but it's put it this way.
Maybe how you respond to it.
Yeah, because how your body systems so your immune system, largely your nervous system, respond to what's happening now is all based on what it's learned from prior experiences. So if it's regularly triggered by, chronic stress or by unprocessed trauma, that kind of thing, then you're likely to get a particular response, which could be quite strong. Because the brain is only really interested in our survival. It doesn't, the brain's not a separate thing that cares about what we're doing or how we feel. It's just basic survival that kicks in.
Okay. Are children more likely to end up with a recurring injury if the initial injury were to occur while still growing?
So it kind of depends on the injury and whether it affects the growth plates.
Right. Okay.
So if someone is sort of a sprain or bony type injury, that sort of thing, and you suspect it's affected that, well, that needs to be looked at properly and managed properly with usually with a team with orthopods and such like. Not necessarily surgery or anything like that, but it just needs to be looked at, because you don't want to take any risks there.
No.
There's no shortcuts that should be taken.
Okay, we'll make this one the last question. Kate was saying there's been some interesting research performed on stress factors in women and the fact that they are more prevalent in women because of a sort of slower energy intake. I think that's what it said. Do you know anything about that? What are your views on that? Yeah, insufficient energy intake.
I wonder what I mean by insufficient energy. I mean, I see the types of people I see are those who, you know, they've tried to get better and it's not resolved as they'd expected. And I say that could be from an elite player who they've tried everything and through to, you know, someone, and I can think of someone actually who came to see me with who'd had ongoing shin problems. I mean, the bit that I deal with is helping them to move on from that. So by the time they've come to see me, they've had all the investigations, so we've got the full picture there, and we're kind of clear ahead to go. They don't need anything else. All they need to do is focus on getting better. So I don't know anything specifically about that. Apart from, you know, probably the obvious things that you know, we need good nutrition and oxygenation for healing, and the thing that slows healing down is when there's chronic stress, because that diverts resources into protection rather than healing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Richmond, for giving up your time, your expertise for us this evening. I have to admit, it wasn't what I was expecting. It was kind of way better than I was expecting. So thank you very much. It was really thought-provoking, I found, and it's really going to make me think about a lot of things. And I'm sure it will make the audience think about, you know, how they behave day to day, how they're moving, how they're breathing, how we're all sleeping. Do we need that one glass of wine, parents? So very thought-provoking. Thank you very much to the audience for coming. This is the third of our Wellness Month webinars. Next week, as I said, we've got Kate Shilland, who is on this evening, and Claudine Thornhill talking about teen nutrition. That's on Tuesday night. And on Wednesday night, we have an eating disorder specialist, a clinical psychologist, and she is just going to give us an introduction to eating disorders, and especially within the sports arena. So what should we be looking for in our daughters and girls when it comes to, you know, maybe over exercise or monitoring what they're eating, and maybe blaming it on sport or using sport as a reason for their changing their behaviors. So if you haven't signed up for those already and they appeal to you, then please do. Tomorrow I will send out an email which is going to have a little survey for you to complete just on tonight and how useful you found it. There'll be a recording of tonight, just in case you want to go over anything again. That will only be available for a limited amount of time, so, you know, do watch it promptly. And then I will also talk to Richmond either tonight or tomorrow and get the list of these books that he was talking about, and I'll include that in the resources so that you can, you know, go and read up on some of these topics if you find them really useful. We would encourage you to follow us on social media if you don't already. We post regularly. As Joe said at the beginning, you know, we want to influence the way that girls think about sport, and we do that through blogging and just through our social platforms. And obviously follow Richmond as well, because he is a wealth of information, even if it's just to monitor his absolutely bonkers ultra runs, and to see how far he's running in all weathers. So thank you very much indeed, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Rich.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rich.